provide either a social security, last 4 digits of your social security number or your license ID number. This is all part of HAVA or the Help America Vote Act.
It's illegal tax.
But now the illegals have licenses.
Yes, but there is a check done.
Hold on, let.
But they have that, so yeah, they have that now though too, don't they?
They have both. Yeah.
So so there is a system in place by which the information is checked, and if there's some sort of mismatch, you go onto, there needs to be an ID confirmation to the name that goes through, right? And that's done through the state board. I understand the concern. The one thing I'm going to say in response to it is that if somebody wants to commit a crime, they can commit a crime, right? If somebody wants to go, but hang on, if I can finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Right? If somebody wants to commit a crime, they can commit a crime, right? And there's no way to stop that, right? If somebody wants to walk out tomorrow, if I walk outside and somebody robbed my car, right, and it's gone now, and I got to take the bus home or ask Glenn to drive me, right? Somebody's made a decision to commit a crime, right? The fundamental basis for our system of government and our democracy and our democratic process is trust. We have to have trust in the system. If you don't have trust in the system, then the system falls apart. That is the basis of, that is the founding principle of democratic republics, right? We trust that we go to the polls, we trust that our votes are counted fairly, right? And we trust the outcome of those elections. I have not seen any evidence at my time in the chair that there has been any situation where an illegal immigrant has voted in an election in New York that I'm aware of. Okay, I haven't seen it. I haven't. And so, if this was, something that was porous, right, it would pop.
Have we ever done any checks?
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
Have we
sure.
done anything to make sure that the person that voted is actually a citizen?
Yeah.
So that check happens. That check happens at the state level. They do a check based on IDs and social security numbers.
But the state is run by Democrats.
But not the State Board of Elections. The State Board of Elections is a bipartisan agency.
But if they use their driver's license and as their way of registering, they want either last 4 digits of your social or your driver's license number. Let's say they say, all right, I'm going to do my driver's license. I'm illegal. I have a license. Here it is.
Exactly.
What prevents that? If they just use their driver's license, that you're saying that the State Board of
There
Elections...
is a check that's done by the State Board of Elections to confirm. Okay, but let me ask you a question. We're concerned about the green light bill, right? Which there are legitimate concerns for that, and I understand the argument, right? But green card holding members of New York State have been able to get a license, right, since before I was born, right? I mean, but hang on. Legal citizens, legal residents, non-citizens of this country have been able to get driver's licenses forever, right?
With
green card.
What a great...
No, but what I'm saying is, there is a difference between a legal resident getting a license and an illegal resident getting a license. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing the fact that the system has been set up during a time where the legal resident non-citizen has been able to get a license, right? So if that system has been in place for, certainly as long as I've been alive, I would guess probably as long as a lot of people in this room have been, have been around, right? Why is that check any different than that? I'm gonna move on. I got some other hands up. I want to make sure.
I'm an immigrant. I know exactly what you're talking about. I had a green card for a number of years.
Yep.
Once I became a citizen, I knew that I could vote. But right now, I have no trust in the system, to tell you the truth, that says that an illegal immigrant who is here illegally to begin with, not only can get a driver's license, the driver's license to begin with should be a different color from a citizen, so that we know exactly that when they go up to vote, okay, it's a different color. But the Democrats, they didn't want that, okay? Because they didn't want to differentiate between illegals and legal citizens. Residents.
I hear you, but that's not. I hear you, and I'm not disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is that the color of the license and who gets a license, that's not me, right? I'm the Board of Elections. I'm not the DNV. I'm not a member of the state legislature, and I'm not the governor.
Show the driver's license, there's no ID to vote.
That's correct. There is no ID to vote in New York State.
What's going on?
All right, I'm just going to make this easy, since I deal with this also myself at work. concerns folks. If, let's say you're a legal immigrant in the United States, you came here on a work visa, on a green card, then the government sets you up with a social security number. There is a license, driver's license you could get. On a driver's license, it lists, you know, like immigrant, what was it, non-citizen driver, something to that effect. I've seen many of these licenses. As far as what the gentleman up front is saying is this. I'm an hypothetical illegal immigrant. I have, I have a social security number. Who knows where I got from? Let's say I didn't even do a social security number. I did my driver's license number. One of these new driver's license numbers goes up to the state. The state says, okay, here is Alan Benben. Let's take a look at the 9-digit number. Is there a social security number attached to this? Let's pretend I stole someone's social security number. They're going to say, wait a minute, the social security number that we're using for Alan Benben says it's linked to Glenn Nocera.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, Glenn, I've been opening up credit
Need
cards.
LifeLock. Don't I guess I need LifeLock.
It gets rejected. Having dealt with insurances over at a city hospital, people will try using someone else's social for whatever. Having came out of being in sales and marketing, dealing with big box retailers, people will go into a store, they will try using, they've ruined their credit, so they take their newborn child's social security number and they try to open up a social security number with their newborn's social security number. Happens, but there's mechanisms, as the gentleman is saying, wherever you go that are supposed to catch it. Now, is anything 100% possible? Can there be a chance that something, somewhere gets through? Of course, it's called human error. That's one of the things that we have to differentiate between. Is it that when Larry Schneier, where's Larry? Right there. Larry Schneier is reviewing these accounts, and he has 1,000 of them pass through his hands in the course of a week, and he goes, well, listen, this is Alan Benben's application to vote, takes a look and says, wait a minute, I didn't catch that the social security number is linked to Glenn. Larry, we're blaming you.
Come on, Larry,
please.
Did you have to go on that coffee break?
The fact is this. There's a difference between it being an honest mistake or somebody, someplace just being negligent versus out and out fraud. And he's saying that whether it's in New York City or upstate, there are Republicans and Democrats watching everything. They don't necessarily trust each other. They're watching each other. That's your check and balance.
I don't want to get us too bogged down in the illegal immigrant license question, right? Because it's not something I'm going to be able to answer. It's not something I'm really going to be willing to dive into, right? It's not my cup of tea, for lack of a better word.
But the point is, what's happening is that the system is broken, and what you're doing is that firstly they zone us differently, and what happens is they flood everybody with, illegal, and they come and say, oh, here, he votes, oh my God, they don't, how can they check? Firstly, you don't need identity.
So I want to say two things.
And they don't check everyone, they're flooding us with illegals with courts.
I'm not really sure what you mean by zones. I hear this argument a lot. There is an argument to be made for voter ID. I'm not making it. There are states that do it. There are states that don't. Can anybody tell me in the city of New York where they've read in the last 10 years that there's been floods of illegal immigrants voting in elections?
Sure.
Can anybody point to a newspaper article?
How would you know?
Anything?
How would you know?
Because you would. Because how many people in this room poll workers? How many people raise their hands before, right? It's part of that process involves, right, the ability for the poll workers at the table to question the veracity of the voter. That's why there's a Democrat and a Republican. And you have an ability to issue a challenge up to them, and you have an ability to challenge that if you believe that the person who's showing up isn't a duly qualified registered voter based on those processes. This is why I started by saying the best way to learn how this process works is to sit down for a day and be a poll worker, because you'll see everything. Right. How we have checks and balances on the lower levels, how the system works. But at the end of the day, if you don't trust the system, then you don't trust the system. Nothing I'm going to say today is gonna make you believe in the democratic process. You either believe in the democratic process, or you don't believe in the democratic
I
process.
have two questions. The first one is, what are you doing in reference to people who are on the list to vote and move out of the state, but they stay on the list for years and years? And then sometimes they come back, vote for that week, and then leave back to the other state. My second question is there anything that could be done for candidates when they are searching for signatures? One party can stand at a street corner and gather thousands of signatures, while another party, because of the 90-10% that you mentioned before, has to go and knock door to door to find out that 90% of the time, either the person is no longer living there or the person is not home. So the signature gathering for that candidate is almost
Very
impossible.
different, very different. It's very tougher for people who have less listening. So I want to take these one at a time. There are specific rules in place by which people come off the rolls, right? They are set by federal guidelines and by state law, right? So every year, we send out an annual information notice mailing. I referenced it earlier, right? When those come back, right, return to sender, right, a lot of times they'll have forwarding addresses on it, right? If they have a forwarding address on it, if you moved from, let's say, where you live to Queens, right, we will then process that move, right, and we'll move your registration based off of that piece of mail which went through the federal, went through a federal government process, right? If they come back, return to sender, no forwarding address, if they come back, return to sender, moved out of state, right, there is a process by which we inactivate voters, right? As for if somebody died, the only way we can process a death is if we receive a copy of the death certificate, right? That may seem cumbersome, right? But it's, again, the only way we can ensure that nobody's doing anything funny, right? I could sit here tomorrow and decide that I want to run for office, I'm going to make 15 phone calls, and I know Jimmy, Johnny, and Tommy are going to vote against me, right? I'm going to call the board and say, well, Jimmy died last week, Tommy died 2 weeks ago, right? And Bobby moved a month ago, right? So if you pass away, if someone you know passed away, the only way that person's getting inactivated off that list as deceased is if a copy of the death certificate is sent to us. Now, not all hope is lost, because we get information from the Department of Health every month, right? And that is, if you died, right, you're going to have that information. It's going to go through the State Department of Health. That information will come down to us, and if we're, if a bipartisan team is reasonably certain that it matches the voter, then we go through, and reasonably certain is name, social security number, address. We make sure all that stuff matches, and then a bipartisan team at that point would do it.
Before you answer my second question, let me follow up on
That works, because you're going to need to remind me of this.
Okay. That process, that system is not going to work 100% because you have John Doe living in an apartment building with 6 family members, and out of the 6 family members, the 4 kids go away to another state, mom and dad stay there. They're not going to mark down like, oh, this kid no longer lives here.
Well,
so you're never going to get that return.
There's 2 separate things here, right? Residency is established by the courts and by the legislature, right? Like, let me ask you a question. If you have a child and that child moves to, let's say, Washington, D.C. to go to school, right? They still consider themselves to be a resident of New York City and New York State. They still come home every summer to live with mom and dad, right? Mom and dad, in many cases, are footing that bill where they're going to class and doing some other stuff. Are they committing a crime?
Okay.
I would say no. I would say that, voting, associating yourself, in New York and considering yourself a New York resident and doing that, is, if you're living here 30 days and you've established that residency. What you're talking about is the potential for people to vote in the same elections in multiple states, right? There are, a good thing I think you should take a look at is there's a guy by the name of Frank LaRose. He's the Secretary of State for the state of Ohio, okay? He, after the 2018 election, did a whole interview, a whole investigation into this thing for the entire state of Ohio, which has a fair amount of people and is a fairly active state. He came up with, in 2018, I think it was less than 15 instances of either illegal immigrants registered, and then voting, or people voting in multiple states. 15. okay, in a unprecedented midterm turnout year. Is 15 too many? Absolutely. Did all of those get referred for prosecution? Absolutely. But the point I'm trying to make here is that 15 out of a couple of million, right? In many, it's a very, 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 very small number of the total pie, right? So yeah, there are people that are going to do that. There are people that are going to commit a felony and vote in 2 states, and that should be found out, and those people should be referred to prosecution. There's no doubt about that. That should happen, right? But that's not. There's no evidence to suggest that that's pervasive. And the Ohio study, and I highly recommend everybody look at this, right? And search the guy's name. He's a guy I worked with when I did McCain's presidential campaign in 2008. He's an outstanding state representative. But take a look at that study. It kind of puts this argument into a little bit more of an actual statistical perspective.
But yet
My second question was about the signature gathering.
So yeah, that's a tough nut to crack. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I've been out there doing this. So how many people in this room know how someone gets on the ballot in New York State? Okay, how many people don't? Great. Okay. So in order to qualify on the ballot for one of the established parties, and we'll leave it at that for now, right? I want to run as a Republican in, let's say, Glenn's district, right? I want to represent the assembly. I want to take the fight to Bobby Cattle, right? In order to do that, I need to get 5% of the registered active number of Republicans, or 500, whichever is less, right? So what Mr. Ramos is referring to here is that if I'm a registered Democrat in the 44th Assembly District, and there's 50,000 registered Democrats or 100,000 registered Democrats, I gotta find 500 of them to sign a piece of paper, right? If there's, let's say, 1,000 or 5,000, right? I have to find 5% of that number, which is going to be 250 if I'm doing my math correctly right now. Okay? It's significantly harder to find 250 of 5,000 than it is to find 500 of 100,000, right? You know, my answer to that question is going to kind of throw it on the district leaders in this room a little bit. I'm sorry in advance. You want to make that equation easier, your district leader should be out there registering people as Republicans. Right? You should be taking the message to the street. You should be taking the registrations out there. The more people you register as a Republican, the easier this equation becomes. That's just the bottom line, right? It's just, you know, so that is the answer to that. That's the simple math problem, right? You want more Republicans, you got to register them. That's how this works. You know, it's been a system that's been around for a very, very long time. We don't get a say in that system in the Board of Elections. That system's codified into state law. So any changes to that system would need to be legislated. All right? In the back.
Robin has a question. She's been raising him for a while.
Wait.
Wait a minute.
All right, let me take him and then I'll come to you.
Yes.
Go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead.
Good.
All right, what qualifications do you have to do what you just talked about, be a poll taker?
So to work
I
election
mean,
day.
do you have to like have massive computer skills or something?
so to be a
That's
poll.
when I'm in trouble.
No. So to be a poll worker, right, in order to work election day, right, and we have different positions, but in order to be an election inspector, right, which is this all-encompassing position that works the scanners and the tables and the BMDs, right, you need to be registered as a Democrat or Republican or appointed by the Democrat or Republican parties, right? That's step number one, because that builds into the bipartisan nature of the program. There are positions for non-registered members of the Democrat and Republican Party, right? We do have accessibility clerks, we do have interpreters, but in order to work at a table and handle ballots, right, you need to be a Democrat or Republican. The next thing you need to do is come to a class that we teach. We do them every year, right? Excuse me, you have to take a class every year, right? It's a 4-hour-ish class, depending on your position. If you're like a coordinator or an AD monitor, that number might shoot up to 6 or 8. But if you're just looking to work the table, the course is 4 hours. Okay? You then take a test at the end of that class. If you pass the test, you work. If you don't pass the test, we may bring you back to take the class again. Right? That is the qualifications to be a poll worker. We're not asking anybody to do a lot of, hard level calculations. Most of the stuff we have now will do that for you, right? But we need to teach you the basics, right? And how to work it. Go ahead.
And one more question.
Mm-hmm.
question, one thing, in regards to the job application,